Welcome everyone to another episode of Podium Stories. Today we have a very special guest in the building, somebody that I've been wanting to interview for a couple of weeks, and we got it together and he's here. I'm super excited about this. His name is Dennis R. Mortensen. He is an expert in leveraging data to deliver business insights. A serial entrepreneur, he has 3 good exits under his belt and has raised $44 million for x.ai, which we'll talk about today. Along with his co-founders, he's out to solve a painful problem, which he's going to speak about today, scheduling meetings. He has created a sophisticated AI platform that saves people time and effort. He's a recognized leader, author, university instructor in the field of digital data and analytics, and he's from Denmark, but living in New York. Is that still correct?
That is still correct, yes.
Dennis, thank you for being here, man. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you taking the time to speak to me. We'll see if I have anything of value to say then. If not, go straight to delete file.
The delete file right away. So I actually wanted to talk to you about the transition between Denmark and moving to New York. I go back and forth between New York and Barcelona. I'm a dual citizen. So I know that it's sometimes not an easy transition, but I want to hear your thoughts on how it came about, what it was for, and how you dealt with that change.
So back in 2008, on May 6th, we sold our prior company to Yahoo. Mm-hmm. And in the deal terms were an agreement of me moving from Budapest, where I actually lived before, and we did a venture out of Eastern Europe, that I had to move over as we closed the deal. The funny thing is that as I arrived in New York, I assumed I would just stay put for a little while and then move out west, Silicon Valley and all of that good stuff.
Right.
And then you blink, 1.5 venture later, 11 years in, I'm still here. Jesus. But the whole reason I'm here is really because of a requirement in a contract. There's nothing wrong with New York. I'm a huge fan of course, otherwise I wouldn't have been here for that long. Mm-hmm. But it was indeed a requirement. And the funny thing now is, if we were to kind of compare back home, and back home for me is Denmark,
yep,
and the US, and I'll use your home as a good analogy here. So doing a startup back home, however clever it might be, is like playing for Stuttgart or something like that. And doing a startup in New York is like playing for Barcelona. And
I'm a Madrid fan, but I'll let that slide.
Oh, so I'm a Chelsea FC fan, by the way. So we can talk about that for 2 hours.
Yeah, that's another podcast.
That's a whole different podcast. But all jokes aside, there's a feeling of just playing for a bigger team in some destinations where you're allowed to do things that you simply can't do in other places, where you raising $10 in one destination becomes doable, but becomes impossible somewhere else.
Right.
So I certainly like the idea of doing things out of New York for where your ambition can't be wild enough. As in, if you are still able to kind of execute on it, people will certainly listen.
It's so interesting because I've had the same experience. I was born in the United States, but I was raised in Barcelona. Then I went to college and played basketball in America. And I started my business in Barcelona. So I've been traveling back and forth a lot. And we do business only in the United States, right? Even if it's remote, that's a whole, like you said, it's a whole different league. It's a whole different culture, business-wise, from Europe.
I certainly remember turning up at home for where I would never have a slide that would say anything that rhymed with $1 billion. But whatever other number I picked, which would be much, much smaller, people would still be skeptical.
Right.
In the US, you're probably not really allowed to turn up if you don't have a slide that at least suggests, even in the kind of wildest, unrealistic outcome, that at least it could potentially become $1 billion business. So the level of ambition is just very different, and the expectation of what you go for is just very different. And if there was one thing I would let's on to that I really like, there's 1,000 things that do not work in the US, but there's certainly also plenty of things that do work. And one of the things that really do work is that they really applaud the entrepreneur.
Yep.
And they applaud the entrepreneur way more than elsewhere. As in, you can be a rock star back home, but to be a rock star, you need to play the guitar and actually kind of go play some stadiums. Over here, you can just play the keyboard and commit some code to production, and you can be a rock star as well. And what I like even more is that if you fail, that is not a stigma for where you are forever kind of put aside. At home, and I'm sure it must be similar, because you and me might be 1,700 miles apart, because I'm in Northern Europe, you're from the other end.
Yeah.
The European attitude is still one for where, I'm thinking about doing my own venture. Oh, so you couldn't get a job?
That's crazy. Why are you doing that?
Now, when you fail, didn't I tell you so? And why did you do it? And now it's probably going to be even harder for you to kind of get a job. It's like, no, now I should most certainly go do another venture, because I've just paid myself some MBA at some cost here, and I'm now kind of function smarter. But that really works well over here, and I really applaud them for that.
Yeah, I 100% agree in terms of like failure, right? And visibility as well. Because I grew up here. My mother never made more than $2,000 per month, but she took care of me as a single mom. But I never saw an entrepreneur. I didn't know they existed. I didn't even know there was a possibility or it was legal. So when I moved to America, I was like, these are my guys. Like, these are ambitious. These are competitive. That doesn't say that Spain doesn't have good things. I was eating patatas bravas and jamon today, and it's amazing. But the culture is so different. But I'm happy we talked about that, and we could talk about it very in depth on differences in culture. But I wanted to ask you about a post that you put out today on LinkedIn, because I do my research very well. And you say about you're focusing on running startups on one primary KPI, right? And for you guys, it's monthly meeting schedules. So why MMS and why just one KPI only?
I am a little skeptical of early stage startups, and that would include the many first years, where you try to optimize for multiple things at the same time, because many times they will be in conflict, as in, I both want max revenue and max usage. Sometimes they will be fully aligned, and sometimes they will not be aligned. So as soon as you start to kind of optimize for multiple KPIs, you have these moments of conflicts that you need to resolve for, and you might not even resolve them the same way every time. So I'm just a fan of the clarity, if at all possible, that comes along with having one KPI. A KPI so well known by each one of the members of the team that you can put up a plasma, font size 800, and the number will just scream to you at 527, and I can feel whether we're ahead today or whether we're a little bit behind. I don't need a spreadsheet or a model. I can just look at it and say, yeah, today's a good day. I can tell that because I looked at it for 4.5 years straight. And that clarity is just a God-given in any meeting, any discussion, any potential experiment that you're going to run, as in, is that going to improve our core KPI? And if not, let's not do it. If it is, how can we take advantage? Tell me more. So that is certainly something for where even as you bring in new people, you onboard them and they become wet in the culture, it just makes them kind of beyond focused. And especially if they come from organizations for where, sure, I had some goals, we didn't really measure them. I'm not sure how they're related to the business unit goals, and I'm certainly not aware of how they're related to the company goals. And it was always a little bit difficult for me to kind of figure out whether we were in good shape or not. Surely they paid me on time, but are we where we're supposed to be? This though, as in, you can call up any one of my teammates right now, and they'll tell you exactly how many meetings we scheduled in April, why we'll schedule even more in May, how many we did yesterday, which one of the current experiments are likely to kind of increase the MMS. So that is just a level of clarity that I certainly recommend if you can go craft. And most businesses, certainly when young, provide a core offering for where there's only very few atomic units. And I gave a couple of examples if we want to lean into that particular post. If you Google, well, it's just the number of unique searches. That's what they do.
Right.
If your Dropbox, it's probably the amount of files saved. If you Slack, the amount of messages. So many times it is possible to find that atomic unit, and you should really just latch onto it.
Right. Let me ask you a question. Let's say you were me. You're running a small with agency, bootstrapped, with 5 people full time, doing basically personal branding for CEOs. What would be the KPI that you would be looking at? What's the one thing in this type of business that you think this is probably the most important thing?
So what would you be selling to me? So don't focus on what you do for you, but what are you doing for me then? So say I would be one of your customers.
Right.
What would be the primary thing you would go sell me on? As in, you and me had a meeting and I will walk away thinking, I need that.
Right. So we have a couple packages, but one, for example, that fits, right? Like, I believe you have 500,000 LinkedIn followers. So
yeah,
one of the things that we do is we ghostwrite for B2B CEOs to grow their personal brand on LinkedIn. Right? Like we do an interview, then we create content. Like that's one of the packages that we sell the most. So let's say we don't do anything else. We do that specifically.
Let's say, and again, you might just have 3, 4, 5, 6 items that comes along with that. But in that world, for me, that will be, what is the amount of content pieces that we post on behalf of our customers? So it doesn't matter. Oh, so you work for 17 CEOs, you post kind of 3 on each. Oh, so this month it was 51. Okay, next month it was 63. The month thereafter it was 72. Oh shit, it's December. Now we kind of see a kind of slight drop. Okay, but we know from last year, because I'm tuned into it, oh, that is just a kind of seasonal drop. I'm still kind of up. Come January, I'm going to see a 20% increase. So something as simple as that, just have everybody rally around it,
I like
immediately
that.
understanding it.
Absolutely. So your KPI is MMS, right? And hopefully tomorrow will be up because I just signed up as a user, and I'm really happy because I signed up because of the way that we communicated, right? I love that experience so much that I was like, oh, I need that as well. Is that what's been working best in terms of marketing for you guys so far?
So well spotted. The primary acquisition channel for us are guests, but not as in we are selling the guests. It's just that the tool is being exposed. So I never sold you anything. You kind of just reached out and we set up a meeting. Obviously, I would be using my own tool, but in me using it, you got infected. Hopefully the tool is good to the extent where you say, you know what? I should sign up for that. People won't do that immediately, but then perhaps on second exposure, you know what? The second time I saw it, let me go check that out. Then you might even sign up. You might not yet turn it into a habit. Damn it. Then a third person kind of schedules a meeting, or you see somewhere else. Okay, let me go set this up and add my scheduling hours, my breather time, my buffer time, my favorite locations, and some meeting templates. Okay, I am now moving to software because email ping pong is not for me. So you're absolutely right. That is the primary acquisition channel. And any company would want some, or would have some fantasy of virality, because any form of virality is really just a discount on what you need to pay Google for keywords. Right? So if my viral coefficient is 0.1, well, that means I got a 10% discount on my keywords because it's just a lesser amount of people I need to go acquire. If it is 1.2, then you never need to buy anything, because for every one user you get 1.2 on the other side. And you can kind of have this, if not kind of exponential growth, but very robust growth simply through usage. And that comes back kind of full circle to where we started, which is, why does Dennis care so much about meetings? Well, the more meetings I do, the more guests gets exposed, the more guests that gets exposed, the more users will sign up, the more users will sign up, the more meetings we create, And here we have our kind of flywheel.
It's like a virus as well, right? It just spreads out by infection, and like you
I'm not
infect
sure
me.
that's a good analogy in these days, but
Yeah,
I hear
these days probably we should change the analogy, but I think that makes a lot of sense, and it seems like, and it's proof that you guys have a good product, right? Like people use it, and then people get infected. Means that the solution that you guys are providing is helpful for them.
so. That is another quick thing to say, but dramatically important thing to deliver on, which is that if the product isn't good enough, there's also a negative virality. So whenever people talk about virality, it's typically with a positive sentiment attached to it, which is that, oh, okay, people talk about it. Yeah, they could also tell everybody that it's shit. So for every one customer you get, there's 10 you cannot acquire because they told all their friends they didn't like it. So everybody should have some understanding of there's risk attached to that as well.
Right. And I think you're right on the spot there. And I want to talk more about the R&D that you guys had to do. But before we get into that, you wrote an article titled "Automation May Take Our Jobs, but it will restore our humanity." Right. And in that one, you say AI isn't as smart as you think, and humans are smarter than we give them credit for. So can you expand on that thought, and can you give it in the context of x.ai? Because you have so much work on the AI field.
Sure. My main thesis in that post was really just one for where we as software got introduced over the last perhaps short of half a century. Many of the things we were asked to do were very robotic, as in not very human at all, as in you submitting your receipts to get reimbursed or any one of your employees doing so isn't really a human task. It's just a very robotic task for where we didn't know any other way to do it, so we just do that. Setting up a meeting, as in you shooting me an email saying, hey Dennis, I'm going to be in Manhattan come December. You got time to meet up for a Diet Coke? And me replying back saying, sure, when are you here? You saying December 12th? Me saying, sure, can we do the afternoon? You saying 4? Me saying 4:30? You saying, sure, thumbs up? Then me going to my calendar, assembling an invite. There's nothing in that little process for where I applied any human ingenuity. I just kind of try to extract some data from you, and you try to extract some data from me, and we try to create some mental overlap and come to that conclusion, go create an event in the calendar. That is not where you and me are adding any value. So certainly where we believe we come in is if that fully disappears, a knee-jerk reaction would be, oh, you're taking away jobs. No, I am removing chores. So the very humans who used to do this chore, which by the way is all knowledge workers. So this is not just assistants. Assistants don't really schedule any meetings. It's just a small part of the total addressable market, about 0.1%. So even if they kept doing it forever, it wouldn't matter. So it's really spread across normal workers. And that chore, as that disappears, at least, again, to come back to the piece, is one for where when that disappears, and the next one, and the next one, then all of a sudden, or one could hope, we will be freed up to do only the things that humans can do. The most creative parts, as in the very things that, provides us joy, excitement, value to the company.
I think you hit it right on the spot, right? Because I remember a quote where you say, AI will make us better at our jobs and better at being human. Like it frees us from sending 1,500 emails that then when it's going to get rescheduled anyway, versus spending that time with our family or doing creative thinking. So I think you hit the spot perfectly in that context. And I really enjoyed that article. We'll link it below in the description because I think it's good to share. A couple more questions before we wrap this up. You guys, I heard a story that especially when you guys raised the first couple $1 million, it was to do mostly R&D, make sure that the project was viable, right? So I've only run a bootstrap business, started from my mom's living room. So I don't understand that relationship between founder and investors, but I cannot imagine that that was an easy conversation or an easy way to manage expectations. So can you walk us a bit more on the fundraising process and understanding that there was a big R&D road to go for?
Sure. So of the 4 prior ventures I've done over the last 24 years, two of them were entirely bootstrapped and two of them were traditionally venture backed. So I certainly have some understanding of what happens on each side. And whenever you're on one side, you dream of some of the positive components from the other side.
For sure.
And doesn't matter which side, there's not one side which is better or worse, they're just different. In the traditional VC pitch, it is one for where a couple of guys, you and me and a friend, get together, hack up some MVP, get a few customers, and go pitch that to a set of investors saying, hey, we were able to do this. If you give us a few monies, we think we could do 5x this. And if we do 5x, we think we're a good new milestone for where we can raise some additional capital. However, in that kind of trajectory, which is kind of the, if I'm very rude, the kind of Y Combinator-like lottery for where you come in, you do some work over 3 months, and sometimes out comes a Stripe or an Airbnb. Hell, I want to be Airbnb, or perhaps not so much today, but certainly Stripe then. And that's awesome. But some things can't be done in some basement in Palo Alto over 3 months. I said, you and me fully understand without any explanation that no rocket to Mars is coming out of that basement in 3 months. And the only way we're going to get there, or an electrical car, or any other kind of major endeavor, that probably requires year-long work and some real investment trying to get to the other side. If we are not willing to do so, then there's a whole set of projects that we simply cannot do. And many of those projects might just be some of the most ambitious ones. So it seems odd that we would not be willing to invest in that, just in general as a society. We are in that category. I'm not saying we're sending people to Mars, but we're certainly in the category for where we're trying to attack something for where there's unsolved science attached to it. So language, which we take advantage of, is not a solved science. I said, we don't yet know how to take this funny Danish-English accent over a page-long rambling, figure out what exactly did Dennis say and what does that mean. You might be able to carve out a corner of the language universe and understand that. And that was our bet. So when we walked out and pitched this, we told investors, this is one of those ventures where we don't even know yet ourselves whether it can be solved. But we have a reasonably good understanding of what it might take to prove if it can be done or not done. And we think the cost of that answer is going to be about $2 million. So if you give us a few monies, leave us be for about a year, we'll come out of that basement looking for a little bit of sun and tell you, thumbs up. That sounds scary. Surely for you and me and most of our friends, I said, just spend $2 million to figure out a thumbs up or thumbs down. That is crazy talk. Sure, for individuals, but as an investment theory, probably not. Because what you do in that is that you certainly exclude a whole set of other people, which is that there's no two guys in a basement this weekend who's going to hack away and come up with something similar, because it's just too costly, right, or too difficult to kind of get to that stage on their own. So that is some sort of defense, but it did, to kind of answer your question, it did very quickly bifurcate most of those that I spoke to into these two buckets of, Dennis, you crazy. You go do that yourself. Spend your own money on that. Or, Dennis, very ambitious. Tell me more. Interesting. So we had these kind of very easy, almost qualification meetings with investors where some would immediately kind of decline and say, thanks much for giving me the lay of the land, and others would then kind of lean in and start to do some due diligence.
I love that. So I want to be super respectful of your time. So I have one last question to ask you. I believe you started your first venture at 23. Correct me if I'm wrong. And that's the age that I am right now. I've been running my business for a couple of years. What's one thing that you would tell Dennis at 23 that would help him throughout all his ventures that the Dennis of today knows and you back then didn't?
I would be very clear about, and this might sound simple, very clear about when do I start the venture when does the venture end, and how do I define whether it has ended? So sometimes you'll just stay alive, but how do you know that you should stay alive? And how do you know that you shouldn't just have killed this? Because there's real opportunity cost attached to that of you not doing another venture. And I've become way stricter about this venture starting on April 14th, 0800, 2014. And I have a very good understanding of what the end will look like, whether it's successful or not. So I'm very strict about that. So I know exactly when I am playing the game. So you don't have this dead man walking, for where you're kind of working it, you're kind of not, you're doing some side gigs, you're just trying to eat really. But I'm suddenly become way stricter in my kind of later ventures. That's one. Two, that doesn't suggest you should cut them short.
Right.
I think most ventures die because people give up too quickly. I think sometimes you can win on just not dying. As in, I've seen people who started in the scheduling space after me and died earlier, not because it was necessary for them to die, just because they didn't get the traction they had hoped for, or didn't get to the destination they had assumed. Right. But if you can just stay alive, that I think is of real value. You and me can translate that into other kind of words such as grit and stamina and willingness and so on and so forth. But that is certainly equally important. And I wouldn't say I gave up earlier, because I've been very strict about my ventures. I've had 4 before this. I spent about 5 years on each. So it's not like we didn't commit to them, but I think I'm becoming even more committed as I kind of run even more ventures kind of later in life, which seems almost counterintuitive, because you're supposed to kind of get older, not as fast, don't have the same amount of grit, and so on and so forth.
I love that. And it's interesting because that answer personally makes me think as well about myself and how I think about when the business finishes. And I hope our listeners also have gotten that takeaway. Dennis, I really appreciate it. I would talk to you for 2 hours. Hopefully one day we'll be able to meet together in New York if the situation kind of gets better. But I appreciate you being here, man.
Hey, this was awesome. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. We'll put links to the website. We'll put links to your LinkedIn. If you have considered using an email scheduling that helps you, I highly recommend it. I use it myself, so talking from experience. If you're listening, thank you so much. Feel free to subscribe or share or don't, whatever you guys want. And we'll see you next episode.